Hello everybody. This is a tutorial on how to create a very simple, very basic AutoSuggest mechanism using HTML5, a little bit of CSS for some styling. It's also using JavaScript and AJAX as well as PHP, and I'm using the MySQL database engine and of course some structured query language. To give you an idea of how this will work, you click in the text box that says enter fruit name and you begin typing. If there is fruit in the database that matches your results, it will tell you. If not, it'll tell you no results. Once you have your text entered in the text box, you can click on the enter button. It will then clear the AutoSuggest results and it'll tell you that your favorite fruit is bananas. If you type in a fruit name that is in the database, you can simply click on it without actually having to type the whole word, and it'll populate in the text box for you. Click enter and it'll tell you that your favorite fruit is apples. Let's look at the code that is making all this work. So we have a HTML5 document with all the normal stuff in it, and in the body we have some HTML and some CSS, beginning with a div with an ID of form div, which really doesn't apply to this particular document, but I threw it in there just to give it an ID. I threw in some styling as well. Next we have a form with an ID of my form. On submit, return false with autocomplete equals off. Input type equals text with a placeholder of enter fruit name. As you can see right here, enter fruit name. Let me refresh the page. On key press, we're calling a JavaScript function of find this with no parameters, and then an ID of text, which is important for JavaScript to be able to reference this text box by ID. Then we have a div with an ID of output. There is nothing inside the div because this is where the AutoSuggest results will show up. Underneath that we have a button with an ID of btn. On click is another JavaScript function, show results. The value of the button is enter. Another div with an ID of submit output. Nothing inside the div. This is where the text will show up after you click submit that will tell you that your favorite fruit is apples or peaches or pears or whatever you enter. I am then closing off the form, and then I'm closing off the div, and I'm closing off everything else. So let's look at the first JavaScript function of find this, which is right here. So first I'm declaring some variables. So variable var fruit equals document.getElement by ID text, which is the ID of this text box, and it's going to get the value of that. Then declaring the variable of output equals document.getElement by ID output, which is this guy right here. And then finally I'm declaring my AJAX request, which is just going to be called request. I'm setting it to a false initially, and then I'm saying request equal new XML HTTP request. If you're not familiar with AJAX, I will be making many more tutorials, and I will give you a complete rundown of how AJAX works, what it is, what you can do with it, etc., etc. Next, I'm then telling the request to open, and it's going to get. You can either do get or post, but in this case we want to do get because we want to get the results. The PHP script is located at getFruit.php, and I'm adding fruit, PHP fruit, and the fruit will equal plus fruit. Now just a quick note, the get specifies the type of request, and then you have your URL, and then you can tell it whether or not it is asynchronous, which is true, or synchronous, which would be false. And you don't need to know anything about AJAX at this point. I will do several tutorials and I will go into detail. Then next we're going to do the request.onReadyStateExchange equals another function within this function. So now we're setting a condition if request.readyState is equal to 4 and request.status is equal to 200. What we're telling it to do is if these two conditions are met, we're setting the inner HTML of the output, the div ID of output, to request.responseText. So it's taking this fruit, and it's appending it to this URL, sending it to getFruit.php, and it's going to tell the server to send back whatever response it gets. So whatever type of fruit is in the database, if that matches what you typed, then it'll show up in the output.inner.html. And then finally we're doing request.send. So the main difference, the method of get, then all you need to do is do request.send, and you don't have to have anything in here. So it'll send the request to the server, and that's it. If you were going to use post, then you would want to actually put the string in here, and I won't get into detail, but just know that for a get request, you don't need to add anything in the send parentheses right here. So that is the find this function. Now let's go ahead and open up getFruit. So what's going on in here is, first I'm telling PHP to include my connection script, so that way we can have a connection to the database. And I'm declaring a variable called fruit, and that equals get, because that's the method we're using, and get fruit. So it's taking this fruit right here, and then this is the actual name of the fruit, and it's going to get that name and put it in a variable called fruit. So fruit will equal whatever you put in there. Next is SQL. The variable SQL equals select name from AutoSuggest. So select the name column from the table AutoSuggest, where name like fruit. So if any name matches what you're typing in the database, it's going to retrieve it. And I'll show you the database right now. So the database is called AutoSuggest, and this is the table AutoSuggest. And it's opened up right here. I have one fruit in there, apples. So select a name. It's going to select a name from AutoSuggest, where name like. If there's any match, if it matches any of the names in the database, anything close to it. And I'll add a couple more so you can see how that works. Then we're setting another variable called query, and this equals MySQL underscore query, the name of the connection variable set in this script right here, and then the structured query language that we're calling to actually retrieve. So we're using the select. And then numRows equals MySQL numRows query. And I threw this in there just to test it out. You don't have to have that in there if you don't want. So if numRows is less than 1, meaning nothing in the database matches whatever you're trying to retrieve, then I'm going to have it echo an unordered list with a little bit of styling, no results. So if there's nothing in the database, then the response text is going to be this echo right here. So for example, you saw that all I have is apples. So if I type pears, it's going to say no results, because the number of rows that is like the word pears is none. Whereas going back, else, if there is at least one row, then it's going to echo starting the unordered list. But I'm not turning off the unordered list yet, because then after the unordered list, I'm going to start the while loop. While row equals MySQLi fetch array query MySQLi assoc, the name, setting the variable name to equal whatever fruit is in the name column, which in our case right now is only apples. Then I'm declaring another variable, send, and I'm assigning it a span with the name of the fruit, and then I'm simply going to echo list onClick, calling another JavaScript function, add to text, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then the parameter, or the argument in that JavaScript function, is going to be name, so the name of the fruit, ID, assigning it this name, literally the name, this name. The value will be the name of the fruit, style, a little bit of styling, so when you hover your mouse over it, the cursor turns to a pointer. And then send, the variable send, which will hold all of this right here. And then finally closing off the anchor tag, and then closing off the list, and then closing off the while loop, closing off the other argument, and then finally we're going to echo closing the unordered list. So all in all, what that means is if something is in your database that matches what you're typing, it's going to show up in an unordered list, and there's going to be no bullets or anything like that, so it'll just look like a list of words, a list of fruit. And then when you click on the desired fruit that you see, it's going to call the function add to text. And what that's going to do, going back to index, right here is the argument that I'm throwing at it. So function add to text name, I'm just going to keep it the same name, setting a variable this name equals document.getElement by ID this name, which is the ID this name, so whatever particular name of fruit is in each list, that's what it's going to throw back to this function, and it's going to get the value of it. So the value will equal whatever the name of the fruit is, which is right here. Next is I'm declaring another variable called output equals document.getElement by ID output, which is this output right here. This is where the AutoSuggest result is going to show up. Var new text equals document.getElement by ID equals text. So I'm calling this text box once again. And the reason being is because when you click on whatever name of fruit appears, it's going to take that value, that fruit, and it's going to throw it in this new variable called new text, which will be the text box. So new text.value, so what we're saying is take the value of this name, whatever the name of the fruit is, and put it in the text box. And then finally we're going to, once you click on the name, it throws it in the text box, and then it's going to take the output, so the AutoSuggest results, and it's going to clear it out, so that way no more names will appear. Now finally what we want to talk about is the button. So you got the name of the fruit that you want, you clicked on it, it threw it in the text box. Now you want to click the button enter, and then it'll call this show results function, which is right here. So var submit output equals document.getElement by ID submit output, this ID right here, it's calling this div. Var this name equals document.getElement by ID text, so the value of whatever is now in the text box, and it's gonna, I'm telling it to take the submit output variable and assign the inner HTML value to equal your fruit is this name. So whatever value of the name of the fruit was in the text box, now in the text box, it's going to throw it in that inner HTML for the div down here of submit output. And I'll actually change this to something else. You selected fruit, colon, save that, refresh. I'm going to enter a fruit name, apples. I'll just click on that. Now instead of saying your favorite fruit is, now it's just saying you selected fruit, apples. So that is how that works. Two other things I want to talk about is, actually one other thing. Let's say that I did type in a word and it matches what's in the database, but I don't want to mess with it anymore. Click anywhere in the document and it'll clear that inner HTML. So I'll do it again. Even if there are no results, click anywhere in the document and it'll clear the AutoSuggest, and that works with this function right here called window.onClick equals function, and it's taking var, the variable output equals document.getElement by ID output, so the AutoSuggest results, and it's just saying clear the inner HTML, clear it out, don't put anything in there. And same thing if you do click on a name that is in the database and you click on that name from the AutoSuggest results, it'll clear that inner HTML as well. So let's go back to the database, and I'm gonna insert a couple more names of fruit. Let's go pears, and then strawberries. Click on go. Go back to browse. So now we have apples, pears, and strawberries. So I can start typing straw, and there we go. It'll populate. You can click on it. It'll finish typing for you because it's taking the value of whatever you just clicked on. Enter your selected fruit, strawberries. And you can do more with this. You can make it to where you can click anywhere in the document and it'll clear this out, or you can have another button called clear and set it up to where you click the clear button, it'll clear the text box and the results of the submitted output. But all in all, that is a very basic, simple AutoSuggest mechanism. And thank you for watching.